After 2 long years, Warhammer 40k Darktide has nearly perfected its gameplay, progression systems, and its replayability. There are still errors that need to be fixed and bugs that need to be squashed, but I'm pretty satisfied with how the game has evolved up to this point. We're now at a point where most of the updates to the game aren't going to be aimed at fixing badly designed systems. Any update that Darktide gets moving forward should introduce new content. But what exactly is that content going to be? New weapons, new missions, and new mission modifiers are all pretty much guaranteed, but I think that Fatshark is going to start focusing on content releases that make even bigger impacts to the sandbox in general. The first thing that I think Fatshark needs to do is rework the Ogrin. I'm going to be bold and state that the Ogrin is the worst designed class in any of the Tide games. Obviously, if you're good at the game, you're going to be able to pick this class up and do just fine, but I'm willing to bet that most players who try the Ogrin have a bad experience with it, especially when compared to the other classes, and this really shouldn't be the case. The design philosophy behind the Ogrin lends itself to a class that's slower than the others, but makes up for that lack of speed with brute strength or overwhelming firepower. The issue that I face with the Ogrin is that when I play it, I don't feel like my character is any stronger than any of the other classes in the game. As a 40k fan, when I think about the Ogrin, I have a really hard time imagining any scenario where you could just be pinned down by a dog or trapped in a net with zero chance of escaping. Additionally, whenever I'm winding up a heavy attack, which is crucial to the design of the class, why does my character slow down? As an Ogrin, shouldn't I be strong enough to wind up an attack while moving at the same speed? My point is that if the class isn't going to be able to dodge as far as the other classes or sprint as fast as them, there are ways to bake the strength that I imagine an Ogrin would have into the game without compromising design philosophy or trampling game balance. And I'm not the only person who thinks that Ogrin is in a bad place right now. Content creators like Mr. E, Reginald, and JTC Live have made videos talking about how Ogrins are the weakest class in the game due to a variety of different factors. With game modes like Maelstrom and Havoc, the game is always swarming you with a horde, waves of specials, and 1 or 2 bosses all at the same time. If the game continues to get more challenging, Ogrins will continue to be phased out of endgame play for the average player, which is why I believe that Fatshark is probably already looking into giving them an overhaul. Realistically, I think that this will be in the form of a talent tree overhaul and giving their weapons access to additional blessings, but it would be really cool to see them address some of the issues that I've brought up regarding the design philosophy behind the class. After the Ogrin rework, I think that Fatshark should add a new class to the game, add Chaos Demons to the game, or add Gene Stealer cults to the game. A new class would introduce a playstyle for everyone to experience, whether you're a casual player or a hardcore sweaty boy. Additionally, we're missing playstyles that are available in Vermintide 2 but aren't accessible in Darktide, namely a summoner or pet class like the Necromancer. I think that it's reasonable to guess that if a new class were to be added to Darktide, we'd get some kind of character associated with the Adeptus Mechanicus, like a Tech Priest or something. It would be fitting for this kind of character to have a playstyle that revolves around minions or gadgets. These could be in the form of immobile turrets, servitor skulls, or just straight up servitors, which can perform similarly to how skeletons perform in Vermintide 2. Additionally, introducing a class with a Mechanicus background could open up a variety of new weapons that could be added to the game, such as arc weapons, transonic weapons, and Volkite armaments. Some of these weapons could be given to the other humanoid classes, or this class could be like the Ogrin, where its weapons aren't shared with anyone else. Honestly, I would see the value in either decision that the developers choose to make here. Next, let's talk about the developers adding new enemies to the game. We all want Gene Stealer cults in Darktide, but I think with the current direction that the story is going, we're likely going to see a variety of different Chaos Demons of Nurgle be added to the game. I can elaborate with the Dark Communion mission, which has quickly become my favorite mission in Darktide because of how story-packed it is. It brings together a bunch of lore and story that was previously only available in the in-game text via Martyr Skulls, and outside of the game via the Vox Transmission YouTube videos. There are a lot of hints in the mission regarding what the Cult of Admonition's goals are, and where I believe Fatshark wants to take the story. Joe Plays Games did a phenomenal breakdown of the new mission on her channel, where she speculates that a Great Unclean One is coming to Darktide. I want to believe that Fatshark and Games Workshop have the balls to add a Great Unclean One to Darktide, but even if they don't, the roster of Chaos Demons that they could add is pretty big. Respectively, Nurglings, Rotflies, and Plaguebearers would make for a great new Horde enemy type, specialist, and elite enemy. If you've played Total War Warhammer 3, you know what Nurglings are all about. They gather up in massive groups to just absolutely swarm enemies. These little guys would be an absolute delight to fight in-game and would force you to aim a little lower whenever you're fighting a horde, limiting your visibility and making them a bit more dangerous than your average poxwalker. Rut flies could be used as the game's first flying specialist unit and could be designed to fly in and kidnap you. Since the counter to nets is to dodge them and the counter to dogs is to push, perhaps you shouldn't be able to dodge out of the way or push these guys because they'd be too big. It would be cool if their counter was to simply shoot them out of the air before they reached the group. Lastly, Plague Bearers can act as a new elite unit that moves even slower than Crushers, are unyielding or unarmored, can't be crowd controlled, and whose slow attacks can't be blocked at all unless you're an Ogrin or something. You would either have to take them out from far away or be on top of your dodges to avoid their demonic blades. Considering the direction of the story, I think that adding Chaos Demons like these would be a phenomenal addition to the game, but this goes even further when you consider the relationship between the Scab and Drag factions in the new mission. Dark Communion explains that there's a clear schism in the leadership of these two factions. The Cult of Admonition is going to continue to do its thing with Nurgle, but what if the Mobian 6th is tired of their crap, literally, and they turned their attention to a different Chaos God? Someone like Khorne, perhaps? A fantastic direction to take the narrative would be to have two Chaos factions in the game that have an uneasy alliance with one another. This kind of mimics Vermintide 2, where the Skaven and Rutbloods are able to work together, and neither faction is happy, but they're working together anyways. Essentially, doing this would create a story incentive to be able to continue to fight both groups of enemies at the same time, even if their enemy palettes are completely different. The Scabs could be coated in blood red armor and to be all about fire and blitzkriegs, while the Dregs would continue to be covered in green drab and retain their current theme of plague and horrendous mutations. I think that it's more plausible that Fatshark goes with this direction instead of adding Genestealer cults to the game, even if they have been hinted at in in-game dialogue. But with that being said, Genestealer cults could absolutely have a place in upcoming content. Assuming that Fatshark is trying to mimic the release of various game modes available in Vermintide 2, Darktide is currently missing a game mode reminiscent of the Chaos Wastes. The Chaos Wastes was a roguelike game mode where you empowered your character across an entire expedition with all sorts of positive modifiers and unique weapon blessings. Randomization was a huge aspect of each run, and it drastically affected the replayability of the game mode, allowing you to spend hundreds of hours exploring it with a different experience each and every time. In Darktide, our characters often talk about a second Hive City and are always told to shut up whenever we bring it up. This would be a phenomenal place to add both Genestealer cults and a game mode like Chaos Wastes into the game. The narrative is there because Fatshark could say that the reason why the Inquisition doesn't want our rejects talking about the second Hive City is because the Genestealer cult has already completely taken it over, and it would allow Fatshark to introduce another faction into the setting where it would make sense. There's no way the Genestealer cults would ever work with the forces of chaos, and this is a good way to keep the two factions separated. I really hope that Fatshark adds any of the things that I mentioned to the game, because I think that any of these would be a huge W for the community and for 40k fans in general. With that being said, let me know what you think is going to be added to the game in the future. This has been Jeficus, and I'll see you in-game.